Silence is not what you think it is. Most people believe silence means confusion, hesitation, maybe even weakness. But when an empath goes quiet, it is none of those things. It is not the absence of words. It is the presence of a decision that has already been made. You didn't notice it when it started. Because it didn't begin with distance, it began with effort. They tried to explain, to fix, to understand what you refused to see. They spoke in ways that were careful, thoughtful, even patient, not because they were unsure, but because they cared enough to stay. But something shifted, quietly, gradually. Not in what they said, but in what they stopped expecting. You see, an empath doesn't go silent when they don't know what to say. It goes silent when they've said everything and nothing changed, when every explanation felt like it disappeared into the same empty space, when being understood stopped feeling possible. And that's the part most people miss. You thought they were pulling away. But they weren't pulling away, they were letting go. There is a moment, almost invisible, where something inside them closes. No anger, no dramatic exit, just a quiet realization that their energy is no longer being received the way it deserves. And once that realization settles in, something irreversible begins. They stop reacting the same way. They stop chasing conversations that lead nowhere. They stop trying to prove what should already be felt. And to you, it feels sudden. It feels like they changed overnight. But in reality, you are only noticing the ending, not the long, silent process that led to it. Because the truth is, their silence was never empty. It was filled with everything they chose not to say anymore. And by the time you realize what that silence means, it's already too late. They were never loud about what they carried. That was the first thing people misunderstood. Because what an empath holds inside does not show itself in obvious ways. It hides behind calm responses, patient listening, and a quiet willingness to stay even when staying hurts. You learned early how to feel more than what was said. The tension in someone's voice, the shift in their energy, the unspoken meaning behind simple words, you noticed it all. And instead of protecting yourself from it, you absorbed it. You tried to understand it. You tried to fix what wasn't yours to fix. Not because you were weak, but because you were aware. You gave explanations when silence would have been easier. You chose understanding when walking away would have been justified. You replayed conversations in your mind, searching for what you could have said better, what you could have done differently. Not because you were at fault, but because you believed clarity could save something that was already breaking. And slowly, without realizing it, you became the one who carried everything. The weight of misunderstandings, the responsibility for emotions that weren't yours, the burden of keeping peace in situations that were never balanced to begin with. You forgave quickly, too quickly. Not because the pain was small, but because you didn't want to hold on to resentment. You convinced yourself that people just needed time, that they didn't fully see what they were doing, so you gave them more chances, more patience, more of yourself. But every time you forgave without change, something inside you grew tired. You stayed longer than most would. Tolerated things that didn't sit right with you. You ignored the quiet voice inside that kept telling you something felt off, because leaving felt like failure, because giving up felt like losing something meaningful, because you believed that if you just understood a little more, things would finally align. But they didn't. And the truth is, no one really saw how much effort it took for you to keep showing up the way you did. They saw your calmness, but not the overthinking behind it. They saw your kindness, but not the restraint it required. They saw your patience, but not the exhaustion it was built on. What they called easygoing was actually you carrying more than you should have. What they called understanding was you tolerating what should have been addressed. What they called quiet was you holding back everything you felt just to keep things from falling apart. And that is where the shift begins. Not in anger, but in depletion. Because silence does not come from nowhere. It comes from giving too much for too long without being met halfway. It comes from realizing that your energy is being used, but not valued. It comes from seeing the same patterns repeat, no matter how gently you try to change them. And eventually, something inside you stops reaching. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You speak a little less. You explain a little less. You invest a little less. Until one day, there is nothing left to give in the way you used to. And when that silence finally appears, people think it's distance. But it's not distance. It's exhaustion that has finally found its voice without saying a word. There's a pattern most people never see because it does not look dramatic. It does not announce itself with conflict or chaos. It moves quietly, almost invisibly, beneath the surface of every interaction. And if you are an empath, you have lived inside this pattern more times than you can count. You do not leave when things get difficult. That is the first truth people misunderstand about you. You stay when conversations become uncomfortable. You stay when emotions get heavy. You stay when misunderstandings could have been an easy exit, because difficulty does not scare you. You are built to navigate it. You believe that anything meaningful will require patience, effort, and emotional depth. But there is something you cannot stay for, and that is repetition without change. At first, it is subtle. You notice small things, a tone that feels dismissive, a pattern of being unheard, a lack of effort that does not match your own. You do not react immediately. You observe. You give space for correction, for growth, for awareness. Because that is who you are. You do not judge quickly, you understand deeply. So you invest more. Communicate more clearly. You try to bridge the gap that keeps forming between what you feel and what is being given back to you. And for a moment, it feels like progress, like maybe things are shifting, like maybe they are starting to see what you have been trying to show them. But then it happens again. The same behavior, the same disconnect, the same feeling of being the only one truly paying attention. And this is where the cycle begins. You invest. You hope. You get disappointed. And instead of leaving, you try again, just slightly differently this time. Not because you are blind, but because you are patient. Not because you do not see the pattern, but because you believe patterns can be broken. With each repetition, something changes inside you. Not loudly, not visibly, but internally. You start watching more closely. You start noticing not just what they say, but what they consistently fail to do. You begin to understand that effort is not proven through words, but through patterns. And when those patterns do not shift, neither does the outcome. And slowly, without confrontation, you begin to detach. Not in a way that is obvious. You are still there, you still respond, you still appear present, but something deeper has already started pulling back. Your expectations lower, your emotional investment becomes more measured. You begin protecting parts of yourself that you once gave freely. And no one notices. Because from the outside, nothing has changed yet. The conversations still happen, the connection still seems intact, the dynamic appears the same. But inside, you are learning. You are learning that effort without reciprocity leads to depletion. You are learning that understanding someone does not mean they will understand you. You are learning that staying longer does not always create change. Sometimes it only delays the inevitable. And this is the moment where awareness replaces hope. You stop waiting for potential and start recognizing reality. You stop focusing on what could be and start seeing what consistently is. And once that clarity settles in, there is no urgency to react, because you already know how this ends. So you become quieter, not out of confusion, but out of certainty. You stop pushing for conversations that no longer hold weight. You stop expecting effort that has already shown its limits. And while everything still looks the same on the surface, the truth is, you have already begun to leave. Not physically, not visibly, but emotionally, you are no longer where you once were. And by the time others sense the distance, you have already accepted it. There is no dramatic ending, no raised voice, no final argument that makes everything clear. The moment everything shifts is so quiet, most people miss it completely. But inside you, it is undeniable. It does not happen when you are hurt for the first time. It does not happen when things become difficult. You have endured both before. You have stayed through discomfort, through confusion, through moments that would have made others walk away without hesitation. This moment is different, because it is not built on a single event. It is built on a pattern you can no longer ignore. You find yourself in a familiar situation. The same conversation, the same imbalance, the same feeling that your effort is reaching somewhere it is not being received, and for a brief second, you consider responding the way you always have, explaining, clarifying, trying one more time to be understood. But something stops you. Not hesitation, but clarity. It is the realization that nothing you say will change what has already shown itself repeatedly, that the effort you keep offering is not being matched, not because it cannot be, but because it is not being chosen. And that truth lands quietly, but deeply. You begin to see things as they are, not as you hoped they would become. Not through emotion, but through pattern, through consistency, through the undeniable evidence of what has not changed despite everything you have given. And in that moment, something inside you lets go. Not of the person, but of the expectation. There is no anger in it. That is what makes it so different. There is no need to prove a point, no desire to be validated, no urge to make them understand what they failed to see, because understanding no longer feels necessary. You finally understand for yourself. You understand that effort without reciprocity is not love, that patience without progress is not growth, that staying where you are not valued is not loyalty, it is self-neglect. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. This is where the emotional shift begins. The pain that once made you question yourself begins to transform into something else. It becomes clarity, not the kind that feels comforting, but the kind that feels final, the kind that removes doubt and replaces it with certainty. You stop asking why things feel off. You already know. You stop wondering if you are expecting too much. You are not. You stop searching for hidden meaning in their actions, because the meaning has always been there, in what they consistently chose not to do. And for the first time, your silence is not heavy. It is not filled with unspoken words or unresolved thoughts. It is calm, grounded, certain. You no longer feel the need to fix what is not growing. You no longer feel responsible for holding together something that requires two people to sustain. And that is the moment everything changes. Not externally, but internally, completely. You are still present, but you are no longer invested the same way. You still respond, but without the emotional weight that once came with every interaction. You are no longer trying to pull something closer that has already shown distance. Because now you see it clearly. And clarity does something that emotions never could. It ends the cycle without needing a confrontation. From the outside, it looks like nothing happened. No argument, no explanation, no visible breaking point. But inside you, something has already closed. Not abruptly, but completely. And once that quiet decision is made, there is no going back to how you used to feel. Because you are no longer holding on to what could be. You are standing in what is. And in that truth, something inside you is finally done. It does not begin with a loud decision. It begins with something you no longer feel the need to do. You notice it in small moments first. Conversation where you would have once explained everything, and now you simply don't. A misunderstanding where you would have rushed to clarify, and now you let it sit. Not because you do not care, but because you finally see what your words have been doing all along. They were not creating understanding. They were creating effort that only you were carrying. There was a time when silence felt uncomfortable to you. You filled it with explanations, with reassurance, with carefully chosen words that tried to bridge every gap before it could widen. You believed that if you just communicated clearly enough, deeply enough, patiently enough, things would align. But now you see the truth you once avoided. Clarity was never the problem. The problem was that it was not being received. And once that realization settles in, something inside you changes. Not in a way that is visible, but in a way that is permanent. You stop over-explaining. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to convince someone to understand what should already be felt. You stop turning your emotions into long explanations, hoping they will finally be seen for what they are. Because you understand now. What is real does not need to be repeatedly translated. You stop chasing closure. You stop searching for the perfect conversation that will make everything make sense. You stop believing that one more discussion will suddenly create the awareness that was missing all along. Because closure no longer feels like something you need from them. It becomes something you create within yourself. And that changes everything. You also stop trying to fix what refuses to grow. This is where the shift becomes undeniable, because fixing was never about control for you, it was about care. You saw potential and you nurtured it. You saw disconnection and you tried to restore it. You saw distance and you tried to close it. But now you recognize something deeper. Growth cannot be forced. Effort cannot be one-sided. No amount of understanding can change someone who is not choosing to see. So you step back, not dramatically, but deliberately. And this is where the contrast becomes clear. You used to react quickly. Now you observe first. You used to give freely. Now you give with awareness. You used to explain endlessly. Now you speak only when it holds weight. You used to stay in conversations that drained you. Now you leave them without needing to announce it. It is not that you have become distant. It is that you have become selective. Your energy is no longer something you offer automatically. It is something you protect, something you place where it is respected, where it is returned, where it does not feel like it is being slowly taken without acknowledgement. And this new version of you does not need to prove itself. You are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You are no longer adjusting yourself to fit spaces that do not meet you halfway. You are no longer carrying the emotional weight of every interaction as if it is your responsibility to make it work. Because you finally see the difference. It was never your job to hold everything together. It was never your responsibility to make someone value what they were given. And once you accept that, your silence changes meaning. It is no longer filled with unspoken explanations. It is filled with certainty. You are not withdrawing out of hurt. You are stepping back out of awareness. And for the first time, your presence is not driven by emotion alone. It is guided by self-respect. You are still the same person at your core. Still aware, still understanding, still capable of deep connection. But now there is a boundary within you that did not exist before. And that boundary does something your words never could. It protects you without needing to explain why. Silence used to feel heavy. It used to carry everything you wished you could say but didn't know how to. It felt like holding back, like suppressing, like losing something you were trying to protect. But now it feels different. Now your silence is not absence. It is presence without exposure. You are no longer quiet because you are overwhelmed. You are quiet because you are aware. And that awareness changes everything. You begin to see people more clearly than before, not through what they promise, not through what they say in the moment, but through what they consistently reveal over time. Patterns become louder than words. Effort becomes more important than intention. And for the first time, you stop giving everyone the same access. This is where discernment begins. You no longer open yourself completely just because you feel deeply. You no longer offer understanding to those who repeatedly misunderstand you. You no longer invest emotional energy where there is no evidence of growth, no reflection, no accountability. Not because you have become cold, but because you have become clear. There is a difference. You still feel deeply. You still notice everything. You still understand what others overlook. But now you choose where that depth goes. Before, your sensitivity made you available. Now it makes you selective. Before, you responded to everything you felt. Now you filter what deserves a response. Before, you believed connection meant giving more. Now you understand connection requires balance. And this is where your silence becomes powerful. Because not reacting is no longer weakness. It is control. You are no longer pulled into every emotional current around you. You are no longer absorbing what does not belong to you. You are no longer trying to correct, fix, or carry what others refuse to take responsibility for. You see it, but you do not step into it. And that distance, that space you create, is not avoidance. It is self-respect. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You are no longer driven by the need to be seen correctly by people who have already shown you how they see. You are no longer trying to manage perceptions or control outcomes through explanation. Because you know something now that you did not know before. The right people do not require constant translation. The right connections do not need to be forced into alignment. You allow things to reveal themselves naturally. You let silence do what words never could. You let people show you who they are without interruption, without guidance, without you stepping in to reshape the moment. And in that space, truth becomes undeniable. Some step forward. Some fall away. And for the first time, you do not interfere. Because your power is no longer in what you say. It is in what you choose not to engage with. Your energy becomes intentional. Your presence becomes measured. Your responses become rare but meaningful. And that changes how everything around you responds in return. People begin to feel the difference, even if they cannot explain it. Because you are no longer easy to read, no longer easy to access, no longer available in the way you once were. Not because you are hiding, but because you are no longer off, airing yourself without awareness. And this is the shift most people never expect. The empath who once gave everything freely becomes the one who decides, who receives anything at all. And in that decision, you do not lose your sensitivity. You finally take control of it. There is a version of you that people remember. One who explained everything, who stayed through confusion, who gave more than was ever asked, but never demanded the same in return. The one who was always reachable, always responsive, always willing to understand. But that version of you no longer exists in the same way. Not because you lost it, but because you outgrew it. The change did not happen all at once. It was built through moments no one noticed, through realizations you kept to yourself, through patterns you quietly accepted as truth. And by the time others began to feel something was different, you were already far beyond where they thought you still were. You are no longer easily accessible. Not in the way you used to be. Your energy is not open to everyone by default. Your time is not given without awareness. Your attention is no longer something people can rely on simply because you once gave it freely. And for some, that feels like distance. But it is not distance. It is alignment. You are no longer reacting the way you once did. Things that used to pull you into emotional loops no longer have the same effect. You see them clearly now, what they are, what they lead to, and what they take from you if you allow them. So you choose differently. You do not respond to everything. You do not explain yourself to those who have already chosen not to understand. You do not invest where there is no consistency, no depth, no respect. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. Because people expect the old version of you. They expect the patience, the explanations, the willingness to stay even when nothing changes. They expect access to a version of you that no longer operates the same way. What they do not realize is this. You are not withholding anything. You are simply no longer offering it where it is not valued. There is no frustration in this. No need to prove a point. No desire to be recognized for how much you once gave. Because that phase of you was never about recognition, it was about who you were at that time. And now you are different. You are calmer, but not disconnected. You are quieter, but not empty. You are more distant, but only from what no longer aligns. And the most powerful part is this. You are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. That need is gone. Because you understand yourself now. You understand what you bring, what you deserve, and what you will no longer tolerate. You understand that being seen by the wrong people does not create connection, it creates exhaustion. So you stop trying. And in that space, something final settles in. The truth that once an empath truly goes quiet. They do not return the same. Not because they are holding onto pain. Because they have moved beyond the version of themselves that accepted it. And sometimes they do not return at all. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. Because there is nothing left in that space that calls them back. What was once familiar no longer feels right. What was once enough no longer meets who they have become. And by the time others realize what has changed, they are trying to reach someone who is no longer there. Not physically, but emotionally completely gone. And that is the part that cannot be reversed. Because this transformation was never about leaving someone else. It was about finally choosing yourself. People rarely understand what they had until the silence becomes permanent. Not when you were there, explaining, giving, trying. Not when your presence was constant, when your effort was visible, when your patience held everything together. They did not see it then because it was always available. And availability is often mistaken for something ordinary. It is only when that presence disappears that its weight is finally felt. Because now there are no explanations. No more attempts to fix what went wrong. No more emotional reach. No more quiet effort working in the background to keep something alive. Just silence, steady, unmoving, and complete. And that silence says more than anything you could have ever explained. It forces a realization most people were never prepared to face. That what you gave was not easy to replace. That the way you understood, the way you stayed, the way you saw beyond the surface was never something common. But by the time that realization arrives, there is nothing left to respond to. Because your silence is no longer waiting. It is no longer hoping to be broken. It is no longer an invitation for change. It is closure. And closure, when it comes from an empath, is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. It simply exists without needing to be acknowledged. That is what makes it so final. You are no longer trying to be remembered. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are no longer holding space for something that could not hold you in return. And in that space, something deeper settles in. Truth that most people only recognize when it is far too late. That presence is not valuable because it exists. It is valuable because it is chosen again and again, even when it is not easy. And once that choice is gone, no amount of realization can bring it back. So if something in this felt familiar, if you recognized yourself in these quiet shifts, in this unseen transformation, then understand what it means. Not everyone will see your value while you are there, but the right ones will never need your absence to recognize it. And if this message resonated with you, hold onto that awareness. Stay connected to it, because understanding yourself at this level changes everything that follows. In the end, silence is not empty. It is the moment where everything that needed to be said finally no longer needs to be.